There's no doubt that Grand Theft Auto is the dominant superpower when it comes to modern open-world action-adventure games. But just under that top tier lies a huge catalog of lesser-known, lesser celebrated, but still quite good games in that genre. Among those is the Hong Kong-based crime drama of Sleeping Dogs. While most open-world action games of 2012 and 2011 were trying to replicate the various systems and tone of Grand Theft Auto games, and largely failing to do so convincingly, Sleeping Dogs more or less tried to do its own thing with the format. While many of the open world tropes and gameplay loops that the open world genre was more than accustomed to were present, Sleeping Dogs gave them just enough of a twist to make them feel like they belonged in that world, instead of feeling like they were ripped out of another one. The usual side quests and vehicle chases that you tend to see in those types of games were accompanied by a more robust XP system and extremely fluid combat that was more comparable to Batman Arkham games than anything else. With that were lots of interesting grapples and counters to learn and master, as well as some truly ingenious environmental kills that were just as fun to pull off as they were gruesome to see. The game's plot and setting were no slouches either, being set in modern-day Hong Kong and surrounding an undercover cop, Wei Shen, who was tasked with infiltrating one of Hong Kong's most notorious gangs. The entire thing was a breath of fresh air at the time, and was just as much so again when the definitive edition of the game came out for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, and Mac. The story took lots of interesting twists and turns that led the player down a dark 20-ish hour long story uncovering the various secrets within the underbelly of Hong Kong's criminal underworld. Many of the roles were also performed by big-time Hollywood talent, which also didn't hurt. So overall, Sleeping Dogs was pretty legit and had way more things going for it than many other similar games of the time. So what went wrong? With so many fans of the game and a name that is still remembered to this day, why haven't we gotten as much as a whiff of a sequel? What the hell happened to Sleeping Dogs? The story of Sleeping Dogs is perhaps a less glorious one than the excellence of the final product might lead you to believe. Initially, way back in 2007, the game was picked up as a dark Chinese crime drama named Black Lotus, but eventually was molded to be a spin-off of the true crime series that would take place in Hong Kong and stand alone in the series as an offshoot of sorts. Developer United Front and Activision operated under this assumption for several years, all the way until 2011 in fact, before several delays and other concerns led Activision to cut the game off and officially cancel it, citing quality issues and ultimately landing on an explanation that any more investment into the game would not make sense as the project was no longer meeting expectations. Despite this description of the game sounding as dire as it did, the game was reportedly playable from beginning to end and still had a lot going for it. But alas, United Front would have to lay off the vast majority of their employees and return to the size that they were before Activision picked them up, which is to say, a workforce in the single digits. United Front was in trouble at this time, and they were more than likely looking at various ways to liquidate what they had and dissolve the company responsibly. Thankfully, Square Enix took an interest in what United Front had made so far, and instead of buying the IP of True Crime from Activision, Square Enix simply partnered up with United Front and retooled the game alongside Square Enix London Studios, and it would ultimately become what we know it as today, Sleeping Dogs. This new partnership would prove to be fruitful as the game would release fairly quickly, only a year or so in development under Square Enix, and received generally excellent reviews. Most outlets gave the game either an 8 or a 9 out of 10, citing the game's robust combat system and gritty noir take on the Hong Kong crime world. On top of that, it did not go unnoticed that Sleeping Dogs brought many of its own flavors to the open world genre, with its leveling systems, ability to replay missions at will, and sheer variety of things to do. To add even more fortune to the story of Sleeping Dogs' release, it sold pretty well all things considered, and even managed to be best-selling game of the week of its release in several key territories. Despite all of this, Square Enix's expectations of how the game was meant to sell were still not met. Despite selling 1.5 million copies within a couple months and being so critically well received, the game just didn't cut the mustard for their new publisher and was ultimately considered a failure in their eyes. Despite Sleeping Dogs' rough upbringing and its inability to meet the expectations of Square Enix, United Front actually did get started on a sequel that was reportedly rather ambitious. The idea was to keep the story in Hong Kong, but move to a different area unrelated to the first game and let players have unprecedented control over various territories by giving them the means to arrest NPCs and build their own police force that they could manage more intimately with a mobile device, affecting the game at large. Unfortunately, this game barely even made it out of the conception stages and would never even see a single day of full production time. Another attempt was made to keep the series alive with an online spin-off for Windows PCs that would require a far smaller budget and less production time. This game, Triad Wars, would indeed make it all the way to beta and would be played by lots of interested PC gamers who largely weren't really feeling it, and that game would be shut down soon after United Front got the message that it wasn't turning out to be what they wanted. And now we can see why the franchise is as dormant as it is. Sleeping Dogs, despite several attempts at being a franchise, is still just one game after all this time. The one glimmer of success that Sleeping Dogs would get would be in a re-release of that original game for modern consoles that would more closely resemble the PC version of the game and include all of the DLC that was released for the original. This version of the game would also receive praise for the same things that the original did, seeing as how much of its charm remained totally intact and unfazed by age and more modern competition. This was not enough wind in the franchise's sails, however, and Sleeping Dogs would finally take the biggest nap of its entire life, in which it still remains to this day. These days, you could describe Sleeping Dogs as a combination of Grand Theft Auto and Yakuza, and you wouldn't be too far off, despite both of those franchises benefiting from the lessons that Sleeping Dogs taught them and continuing to generate a reliable flow of sales that fund their next projects. Sleeping Dogs itself just couldn't quite find its own footing, and that's unfortunate for those of us who loved it and were hoping for another. While Square Enix today rakes in cash, perhaps one day the proper funding of a real return to the underbelly of Hong Kong might make sense, but for now, with only one game that has made it to release, much less made its money back, sleeping is all this franchise can afford to do. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.